Hi, welcome to this channel on magnetic energy, technology, principles, and applications. This video is magnetic energy and polarities, and I have show and tell. So these are just a couple of magnets from an old unit. They're quite powerful, and they help illustrate a point. Right now I have them on repel, and it'd be pretty difficult to push these together. I mean, it's possible, but it's pretty challenging. So what I want to talk about is this idea in conventional science that the polarities of magnets, and we're going to move into the polarities of everything. So the polarities of magnets, it's this conventional thing that there's a north and south polarity, and that the force that I'm feeling right now on this repel is a north to north or south to south. So in the New World magnetic energy model, I guess that's a cool way of saying it. So in the magnetic energy model, the force that I'm feeling right now, whether it's on attract or whether it's on repel, is a result of the etheric flow of energy flowing through these magnets. Okay, that the field that is created around these magnets that we can feel when we do this, when we put them on repel or attract, that field is the result of an etheric flow. That etheric flow is a constant. That etheric flow is at an extremely high rate, which is why it's so difficult to measure with conventional equipment. So in the future, this will become incredibly obvious, and this will just be like the simplest proof, if you will, of the ether, of the etheric field, of the etheric exchange. Right now, however, there's a completely different explanation for why this phenomenon is taking place. And once the technology comes out and things are changing and there's some expansion of consciousness and all this stuff, that whole old model will be completely it'll be abandoned. Right? It'll be abandoned. And the new model that says that this is the result of etheric flow, that will be the accepted model. The polarity is the magnetic resonance signature that is part of this field. It's the internal part of this field. It is the subatomic expressions of this field, and so I'm going to identify just a few of the characteristics that help change this field. The first one is the elements involved. So there's particular elements that make up these magnets, for example, as well as other magnets like neodymium and rare earth or whatever, even plastic magnets. So that the elements that compose the magnets help determine the actual polarity. What we call the polarity in the magnetic model is not just simply this crude force of attract and repel. No, it's what's inside of that. It's the magnetic resonance signatures of that force. That's really the polarity, and that's why there's an unending variety of those. Now, just think for a second, what I'm saying, I'm talking about magnets right now, but what I'm saying applies to all elements, and not only elements, it applies to pretty much everything. That there's measurable polarities of everything that have these certain factors, like the elements involved is one of them. Another factor will be the pulse rate. Now, in a magnetic unit, we can create pulse rates by using magnets and by basically alternating the polarities and allowing, like coils, for example, to move through those polarities, and then we create a buildup of magnetic energy to the point where it then releases as a pulse of energy. So that's like one way to create a pulse. But the etheric flow is already creating pulse rates in everything because it kind of does the same thing. The etheric flow has this buildup and release of energy that goes then back into the etheric flow. And so you have natural pulse rates, magnetic pulse rates, and we call it magnetic pulse rates in everything because because it works on an attract process like a magnet. Now these are highly organized. This is a highly organized system of energy and elements and molecular structures. They're organized. But with magnetic technology, especially with rotating and counter-rotating neutral magnetic fields, you can actually organize all systems. Like, so you can take something that we traditionally consider as non-magnetic, and we can organize that so that it can be attracted or repelled just like a magnet. So, and we're going to get back to that in a minute because it goes much further than that. So the pulse rates of a given, that also is a component of the polarity. So you have the elements involved, you have the pulse rates, and then another thing is just simply the intensity of it. Now again, with magnetic technology and with like neutral fields and how we control and modulate these magnetic fields, we can also influence their intensity. So we can make them more or less intense. And so a lot of it will be like how a magnet is manufactured or made. That may be its initial intensity, but that intensity changes depending on what we do with the magnet, and we either increase the molecular organizational structure in that, or we just saturate it with a lot of neutral pulsing energy that allows the magnetic field around that magnet to greatly expand or be greatly enhanced. Okay, so we've got the intensity, we've got the signatures, we've got the pulse rate, and the molecules involved, obviously the molecular structures. Now, so why is this interesting? The fields, the resonant signatures on this help determine how these magnets interact with not just paramagnetic and diamagnetic and ferromagnetic materials, but it also even dielectric materials. Okay, so the subtle resonant signatures involved in these magnets, in what we would call the polarities, that is critical to the functioning of the units. So that's why, for example, when you have certain units that have a very specific type of magnet involved, that magnet cannot be swapped out for a different type of magnet, like a stronger magnet or a magnet that has different elements involved in it. That particular unit needs the signatures, the magnetic resonance signatures of that particular type of magnet in order to function properly. And so you don't necessarily always want the strongest magnets. Sometimes you want magnets that can switch their polarities very fast and they're like weak in charge, like plastic magnets. Or you want magnets that have a greater depth of field exposure versus a highly intense concentrated field. And so what we're thinking, just think in terms of what is the etheric expression of that magnet, what are the compositional properties of that magnet and the pulse rate, and how is that interacting with the paramagnetic or the diamagnetic materials? Because when you can have a great charge build up, for example, in a paramagnetic material, that material then can offer you tremendous power of attract, and when you're trying to compensate for magnetic holdback, you want that energy released very quickly. So this is one of the reasons why I always come back to the magnets themselves are almost never the driving force of the units. Okay, it's the energy flowing through the magnets that we then utilize to make either a paramagnetic or diamagnetic material the driving force of the unit. And the reason we do that, and even a ferromagnetic materials can contribute to that as well. And that's because it's much easier to turn those fields on and off in those materials, but it's the initial magnetic resonance signature that comes from the specific magnets in the units that makes that possible. And so let's talk. I want to bring the metaphysical side of this in, because at this point, holy cow, this is almost like a philosophy, hopefully not a religion, but like a philosophy just as much as it is a science, especially at this stage. And I think that's very important, because a lot of this comes down to we need new philosophies, we need new principles to think about. And so now when you think about a human being and think about all of us, we have a lot of magnetic polarities, if you will, that is energy fields that are in us and around us and through us that have very specific magnetic properties to them. They have very specific signatures, resonant signatures. And in a normal, healthy human being that is not being bombarded by a soup of EMFs and electrical fields, those magnetic resonant signatures throughout our bodies and our chakras and how they interconnect with our energy bodies, those will be in harmony with each other. They will sing, they will complement each other, they will work very well together, but they are quite sensitive to their environment. And that's so important. So when you take human beings and other life forms and you subject them to ongoing a soup of electromagnetic activity, that disturbs the magnetic resonant signatures in their bodies, around their bodies, and that causes the human being to not function at its full capacity. Now, there's a lot of conspiracies around this because you could say, well, wow, that's partly why everything is like cycled at 60 hertz a second, or that's partly why certain fields are the way they are, because what they do is they suppress human abilities. They suppress the ability to astral project or to have spontaneous healing or all kinds of psychic experience or any type of paranormal experience. So I mean, and there's some legitimacy to those conspiratorial claims, because when you subject our own human bodies and our own environment that are highly sensitive to electrical fields, that throws off those magnetic polarities, those resonant signatures, and that's really something that has to change. And with the evolution of magnetic technology and the evolution of consciousness, what we will do is we will learn as a species, we'll become more and more sensitive to that, and that will be one of the reasons why we completely phase out electrical power generation, electrical fields around us and everything, because we will tune in to the incredible orchestra that is all around us from a purely natural point of view, the orchestra of magnetic resonant signatures that work together and complement each other and accent each other and allow for an incredible flourishing of abilities. Teleportation, levitation, psychokinesis, all these type of things. These are the abilities that we are meant to do, but in order to do those things, we need our magnetic resonant signatures working at full capacity. We need them working well. And one of the things that magnetic energy technology will do is it will help us enhance those signatures, improve those signatures, clear out the cobwebs, if you will, the magnetic resonant signatures that are not working for us. And think about what I'm saying. You can use magnetic technology to amplify, accent, empower, raise the vibration, raise the pulse rate of the magnetic resonant signatures in you and around you. Okay? So just please digest on that for a minute, because when you think in terms of enlightenment and what that means, you think in terms of evolution of the physical body and the consciousness and our DNA changes, and that process and the natural process that's going to be happening, and how magnetic technology and neutral magnetic fields and natural magnetic fields, how they can influence that process and enhance that process, we're talking about some pretty powerful stuff and an excellent justification for bringing magnetic technology to this world to help people with that and help them rebalance their energies and rebalance the polarities throughout their bodies, especially throughout their brains and their consciousness. There are a host of medical ailments and illnesses and psychological illnesses and mental illnesses that are primarily due to an imbalance of magnetic resonant polarities and signatures. And one of the things that magnetic energy technology can do is balance those out and bring those into harmony and allow a person to function with clarity and 100% efficiency. So, magnetic polarities, it's so much more than just the simple repel and attract. It's the energy inside of those fields that are attracting and repelling. That's the real polarity. That's where the magic takes place. And with that, I will see you next time.